one of the most famous lines in the Megillah. And it's a line that is repeated every Saturday night throughout the year. Is the verse, La Yehudim Hoisa Oira V'Simcha V'Sasayin V'Yikar. At the Havdalah service Saturday night, we repeat this verse that to the Jews there was light, there was simcha, happiness, sasayin, there was joy, v'yikar, and there was beauty. And the Gemara goes on to say, in the tractate of Magilla, page 16, side B, Oira, light, this means Torah. Simcha, joy, this means Yom Tiv, holiday. Sasayin, joy, this means Milah, circumcision. V'yikar, this means tefillin. In other words, that these four mitzvahs was something that Haman was against. It was detestable in the eyes of Haman. And now that Haman was destroyed, the Jewish people were able to continue to do these four mitzvahs outwardly without any worry or concern from the enemies. Number one, the Megillah is called the Megillah of Esther. The Queen Esther was the one that decreed, Kisvuni ledoidesh, write me down, write this story down for all generations. And therefore the Sanhedrin, the rabbis of that time, wrote up the Megillah based on divine spirit. It's one of the 24 books of the Tanakh. And this is a book that is so great that when Mashiach comes, we are told that all the other books of the prophets will be nullified besides the book of Megillah of Esther. And furthermore, all the other holidays of the year will be nullified besides the holiday of Purim. So on one hand, we see the importance of this Megillah, of this writing. Furthermore, not only do we read it twice on Purim, but the actual statement of La Yehudim Hoisa Oira, to the Jews there was light, is read every Saturday night after Shabbos, after the holiest day of the week. We now enter back into the everyday work day. What is the inspiration that we derive? We say the pasuk, La Yehudim Hoisa Oira, to the Jews there was light, there was happiness, joy, and there was splendor. And it's interesting, in the Havdalah service, the only line that the entire community repeats is the line of La Yehudim. In other words, the one who makes the Havdalah, he says the whole service, the whole prayer on his own. But when it comes to La Yehudim Hoisa Oira, everybody in the room together shouts out in a loud voice, La Yehudim Hoisa Oira v'Simcha v'Sasam Yikar. What is so special about this verse? What does it mean? Why is it carried out throughout the entire week? And something which is underscored at the Havdalah service. So the Gemara goes on to say, in the tractate of Megillah, that Oira, light, means Torah. That now the Jewish people were able to study the Torah. Simcha, what does joy mean? This is Yom Tiv. This is the holidays. They were able to now celebrate the holidays with joy outwardly. Sasayin, which is another type of joy, another type of happiness, which is considered to be even greater than Simcha. This is Milah, this is circumcision, the Bris Milah. And finally, V'yikar, what is V'yikar? Beauty and splendor. This is Tefillin, this is the wearing of tefillin. Now, to elaborate each one of these four details, what makes them unique, and why is this the light and the inspiration for the entire week? First and foremost, Oira. Oira is light. Now, it's interesting to note that King Solomon tells us, Ki ner mitzvah v'Torah. King Solomon tells us that the candle is the performance of a mitzvah, and Torah is compared to or, the light, the flame of the candle. But in Hebrew, the word or is masculine. Oira is feminine, implying there are two types of Torah. There's the masculine Torah and there's the feminine Torah. In the book of Esther, we're talking about a book that was instructed to be written by a woman. The word ora is feminine. What does it mean, a feminine Torah? There are two types of Torah. There's the written law and the oral law. The oral law was written by God. In other words, God instructed Moshe letter by letter how to write the Torah. This Torah is the masculine Torah. It was given from the Creator to us, to the world. And therefore it's called Or, it's the light of the world, but it's the masculine light. Ora, the oral law, this is the feminine Torah. This is the way we learn the Torah, the way we discuss the Torah, the way we understand the Torah. The general difference between these two lights is that the written Torah, we have the terminology Azoyes geschrieben. This is the way it's written, and you cannot change it. In other words, if you understand it or not, this is God's word. And that is why, interestingly, that to fulfill the mitzvah of the study of Torah, the written law, you don't need to understand it. What's the proof? We see a bar mitzvah boy who's 13 years old, gets called to the Torah. He cannot even read Hebrew, and sometimes he cannot even read the blessing on the Torah, yet he makes the brach on the Torah. How can you make a brach on the Torah if you can't even read the Hebrew and you have no idea what they're saying? And most people, when they get called to the Torah, or many people who get called to the Torah, don't really understand what the Balkora, the reader, is saying. Yet, you make a bracha. It's a bracha in vain. When you make a bracha to eat a piece of cake, you eat the cake after you make the bracha. If not, it's a bracha in vain. You're saying God's name in vain. How could you make a bracha on Torah and not understand the Torah that you're learning? So in reality, you say it's Or, it's God's light. And even if you could understand it, you don't understand it. In other words, being that God is infinite and God's Torah is infinite, how much we think we understand is really nothing compared to the infinity of the knowledge of Torah. So it makes no difference between someone who understands the literal words and someone who has no idea what those words mean. You both, before God, know nothing. And therefore, you can make a bracha when you get called to the Torah, though you have no knowledge of Hebrew. However, when it comes to the oral Torah, which is the Talmud and the meaning of Torah, here we are told it's called Eira. It's the feminine. Here you must understand. If you do not understand what you are learning or what you are saying, you do not fulfill the mitzvah of the study of Torah. Furthermore, in the book of Deuteronomy, it says that this Torah, kihi chochmaschem uvinaschem, this is the wisdom of an understanding in the eyes of all the nations of the world. What does that mean? How do the nations of the world know that the Torah is the wisdom and understanding of all the nations? Because the answer is the nations of the world learn Torah. As we know, not only do they learn the 24 books of the Torah, but the nations of the world, they learn Talmud. And they're allowed to learn Talmud. On the contrary, the Talmud says that a Noachite that learns Torah is equivalent to a high priest. I was talking to a Noachite last week, and I said to him, I think you're the only high priest I know today. Because amongst the Jewish people, there's no temple today, so there's no high priests. But yet, a non-Jew, a Noachite who's a scholar in Torah, is equivalent to a high priest. So I said, you are a high priest. So the idea of Torah is found amongst the nations of the world. Yet, what makes Ora, the light of Torah, unique? What makes Ora unique is that even though primarily it's a book of knowledge, it's a book of intellect, it's a book of understanding, at the same time, it says in Ethics of Our Fathers, Kol sheyires chetoi kidemes lachachmasoi, chachmasoi miskayemes, which means anyone who the fear of sin precedes the wisdom, then this wisdom is eternal. In other words, when it comes to the study of Talmud, when it comes to the study of the oral law, even though it's based on logic, the end of the day, the law is the law. Even if it's illogical, and you came to that conclusion with logic, right now, once it becomes law, this is the way we follow it. This becomes the mandate. Now, you can argue, I don't understand it. It makes no sense to me. I want to do it another way. And you told me this is the knowledge amongst all the nations of the world, which means I need to understand it. Yet, this is the paradox within the Torah. Being that it is the knowledge of God, we say even after you are demanded and commanded to use your knowledge and to use your intellect to the fullest degree, at the end of the day, when it comes to the halacha, when it comes to the application of the law, we need to follow the code of Jewish law. We need to follow the majority ruling. Now you can argue that there are 71 rabbis in the Great Sanhedrin, and the majority say one thing, the minority say the other. But the majority are not so smart. Maybe the minority are smarter than the majority. It doesn't matter. The Torah says we follow the majority, that becomes the halacha. So on one hand, it's all about intellect. On the other hand, we say no. This is God's law. It is the dedication and the subservience to the greater reality, to the greater picture. This is the light of the Torah. Similarly, we move on to Simcha. What is Simcha? Holidays. What makes our holidays unique? All nations of the world celebrate holidays. There's New Year's and there's other holidays that people celebrate. What makes this holiday of the Megillah of Am Yisrael unique? When we celebrate a holiday, we drink wine and you eat meat and you have good food and you have friends over. It's not about getting drunk. It's not about leaving the world or leaving reality. On the contrary, you are eating this food to celebrate God and to get closer to God and to get closer to your friends. Even on Purim, where on one hand the mitzvah is ad lo yoda, which the literal translation means you should drink wine until you don't know anymore. What does that mean? You don't know the difference between Baruch, Mordechai, blessed is Mordechai, and cursed, utter Haman, cursed is Haman. Now, what is that supposed to mean? We're talking about, on one hand, Mordechai, who was a tzaddik, a holy Jew, who cared about every person in his generation, who was a leader, who saved them from this terrible peril of Haman. We say no. On the holiday of Purim, you should get so drunk you don't know the difference between this holy person, this God-fearing person, this kind person, who his name is Mordechai, and the biggest, most evil hate-monger in the world, Haman. No matter how drunk you are, you should always know the difference between Mordechai and Haman. So how do we understand this statement? Now, there are many interpretations to this. But one interpretation is as follows. Ad lo yada, which means even when you are not conscious, you are unconscious, even then you have to have awareness. There has to be the consciousness, even when you are not conscious. And know there is a difference between right and wrong. Even in that state of unconsciousness, of ad lo yada, when you don't know anymore, you still need to know there is a Haman and there's a Mordechai. There are right things and wrong things. Drinking is not an excuse to do stupid things. Drinking is not an excuse to do sins and violations. On the contrary, you need to reach this state that even in your state, when you are not conscious, you still have the awareness of God and the holiness of Torah and mitzvahs. So this is the meaning of simcha, of joy. The next level is sasain. Sasain is another level of joy. What is this? This is the level of Megillah of circumcision. Now, first and foremost, it's important to note that even though the mitzvah of circumcision is upon a young boy who's 8 days old, the Talmud has stated that women are born circumcised, which means that the advantage and the unique bond that one has with God through the circumcision is not only by a male of 8 days old, but on the contrary, a woman is born with this 8 days earlier. She already has this bond between God and herself, which is the reason why in traditional Judaism, a girl matures faster than a boy, because already 8 days earlier, she had this connection. She had an 8-day start, and therefore her godly soul already entered into her body then. At the age of 12 already she's now mature and becomes a bas mitzvah. She becomes responsible and obligated to fulfill the commandments of the Torah. A boy is a bit slower. Most guys, not talking about me, most people are a bit slower. And it takes another year till they reach, to catch up, till they reach the age of 13 to be bar mitzvah. But what is the idea of milah? What is the idea of circumcision? So we find it a famous story in the Talmud that David HaMelech, King David, was in the mikveh. He was in the bathhouse. And it says he became very upset, became despondent. He said he realized for that moment he was naked. He was naked from mitzvahs, because throughout the day he wore tefillin on his head, he wore yarmulke, kippah. He had tzitzis, these strings. So wherever he was going, he was surrounded by mitzvahs. For the first moment, when he went into the mikveh, he goes, I have no mitzvahs. I'm no longer connected to God. Because the word mitzvah means connection. The Gemara goes on to say, when he reminded himself that he was circumcised, he realized that even now, I'm connected to God. Now the question comes to mind, what do you mean he had to remember he was circumcised? Which person forgets they're circumcised?
Babies don't remember.
Babies don't remember, but adults remember. So what is the meaning? And he reminded himself he was circumcised. He calmed down. So the Rebbe explains that at first glance, David HaMelech thought that the circumcision was a one-time act. At 8 days old, you have the bris, and it's over, you're finished. He realized that circumcision is not a one-time mitzvah, but every moment that you don't have a foreskin, you are fulfilling the mitzvah of circumcision. So it's a recurring mitzvah. Every moment you are being recircumcised. Every moment this bond is once again being affirming. The affirmation of your connection with God happens every moment. This is true for a man and a woman. Furthermore, why is it called sasoin? Why is it called joy? The Rambam in Moreh Nevuchim, the guy for the perplexed, says that through the circumcision, it helps a person diminish their temptations for worldly things. That is one of the reasons behind the circumcision. And the average person will say, you got to be crazy. I want to increase my desires and temptations and pleasures of the world around me. Yet, a person who's godly says, no, on the contrary. I'm happy with this mitzvah because it allows me to be able to focus more on spirituality and godliness and acts of goodness and kindness. So this is the meaning of milah, the milah of circumcision. And then you have the mitzvah of yikar, which is the mitzvah of tefillin. What does tefillin tell us? Tefillin seems to be some sort of an odd mitzvah. Because on one hand, it's called a crown. You're putting it on your head. On the other hand, what do? You're taking the hide of an animal. You're taking the hide of the lowest part of the animal. In other words, not only are you taking the brains of the animal, and in general, animal kingdom is lower than the human kingdom. We're putting something which is from a lower kingdom on our head. And not only are we putting something of a lower kingdom on our head, but we're taking the part which is the most external, which is the skin, not the brains or the heart of the animal. And we put it on our head, the highest part of our body. And we say, this is our glory, this is our pa'er, this is our crown. Now, there are those people who are smart, they put diamonds on their head, at least it's valuable. Why are we taking the hide of an animal? And this is called v'yikar, this is our beauty, This is our splendor. So you can argue that in the tefillin it says Shema Yisrael. It's not only a box, but there are 4 portions. And in that portion it says Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Hear, O Israel, God is our Lord, God is one. And we know, by the way, when we put on tefillin, God also puts on tefillin. What does it say in God's tefillin? Umi ka'amcha Yisrael goy echad ba'aretz. Who is like the Jewish people, one nation amongst all the other nations. So we say God is one, and He says we are one. But what makes the tefillin unique? And the answer is very simple. Ki kein tziva hamelech. This is the decree of the king. This is what God said we should do. The mere fact that God told us to do this, this means we are being subservient to God's will. That subservience is the highest connection that one can attain with God. You cannot connect with God merely through intellect. Our intellect is limited. How does one truly connect to God? By being subservient to God. And that is by taking the hide of the animal and putting it on our head, even though it's illogical. Why? Because God said so. It's interesting that the tefillin not only goes on your head, but there are straps that bring it down, all the way down to your feet. Which means the Kabbalistic meditation of tefillin is that I connect my heart to my mind together. Usually the mind thinks one way and the heart is going another way. So you're going in 2 different directions. The idea of tefillin is to bring balance and mindfulness and wholesomeness to the person. And that is to connect the mind and the heart, that the mind rules over the heart. And furthermore, it doesn't only remain in the mind, but the fact that the tefillin straps go down means to take the intellect, to bring it into your heart, to bring it into your action, even down to your feet, that everything is aligned and consistent with the mind. Haman, however, was against all these mitzvahs. Why? As we said here in the Megillah, Haman was called Haman HaAgogi. He came from Agog. Who was Agog? Agog was the king of Amalek, the Amalekites. What is the meaning of Amalek? There are many interpretations to what Amalek means. But one of the meanings of Amalek is, there's a mitzvah in the Torah called Malika, the same root as Amalek. What is Malika? Malika means separation. To separate the head of the bird from the rest of the body. Really what you're doing is you're separating the head from the heart. That is Amalek. Amalek says, yes, there's intellect in the world. But the intellect and action, the intellect and the response are 2 separate things. Let's separate the 2. Be smart, acquire wisdom, but let it stay in the head. You don't have to change the way you act, the way you feel, and the way you interconnect with other people. And that is really the antithesis of tefillin, because tefillin says, no, the head and the heart is one. And not only that, it has to change the reality of the person. So comes along the holiday of Purim, and we say that, and that is, there was light, there was joy, there was happiness, and there was beauty. And we take this bracha, we take this blessing, and we say this not only on Purim, but from Purim, which is the mitochondria of joy for the whole year, we continue to repeat this every Saturday night at the beginning of the week. And that is to take the holiness of Shabbos, and to take that holiness of Shabbos like the tefillin, and to continue to draw from that holiness, from that intellect, from that connection of Shabbos throughout the rest of the week. And that truly will give us light and joy and happiness. And that is why you see when the Shabbos begins, you light 1 candle or 2 candles. When the Shabbos ends, you light a torch. Because throughout the Shabbos, you increased with your Kiddush, and with your Torah study, and with your mitzvahs. So that little candle, which represents the light of Torah, and the performance of mitzvahs, now grew from a candle into this powerful torch. And then you take that light, and you take that new light, that new torch, and you bring it throughout the rest of the week. We're talking about the mitzvah of tefillin, to mention that after Raid on Entebbe, when over 100 Jews were taken hostage. The Rebbe at that time said they should check the tefillin and the mezuzahs of all the people that were taken captive. And each of them had different stories. But one of the stories that happened was, Rabbi Halperin from Brazil says that he checked the houses of two of the students who were on the plane, and they opened up the mezuzah, and it said over there, the word Shemayim, the word heaven, had a hole right through the word Shemayim. And it was in the heaven, it was in the airplane, in the sky, that it was hijacked. So we see the importance, how tefillin and mezuzahs, and all of these holy scrolls are not only a mitzvah, but it's also a protection. It's also an inspiration, which brings healing and security to Am Yisrael, to the Jewish people, and to the rest of the world, to our neighbors, to our friends, to the entire city and the entire community. So we hope and pray that this Purim will bring about the ultimate Purim, that there should be, the world should be a world of light, and there should be a world of simcha, of happiness, and a world of sustained and joy, of yikar, and beauty and respect, with the coming of Mashiach speedily in our days.